the webcasting introduction. This meeting is to be webcast. I would like to remind everyone present that this is a hybrid meeting. It will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or such other use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to be filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. If any public speakers on Teams do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please also be aware that if there are any technical difficulties that interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting for this evening. Members, as always, you're reminded when you're speaking, please turn your microphones on, and when you've finished speaking, turn your microphones off. Apologies for absence.
None, Leader.
Okay. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay. Minutes of the last meeting, can I take those as being an accurate record? Agreed. Thank you very much. Any additional reports of portfolio holders? Okay, that's fine. And then item 6, do I have any public questions or requests to address the Cabinet?
Yes, Leader. We have Celine Jeffcoat from Chigwell.
Good evening, Ms. Jeffcoat. I'm assuming you're there?
I am here. I am indeed.
Wonderful. And you'd like to address the Cabinet on a particular item this evening?
2 items, in fact, if I may, Chair. 3
Okay.
minutes on
So thank you. They'll be taken separately in that case. So I take it they're on items 9 and 10?
Yes, that is the budget and the business plan.
Okay, so you have 3 minutes on each, and Vivian, you'll do the timekeeping for me. Thank you very much. So item 9 is your first statement.
Lovely, thank you. I've asked to address the Council on 2 separate matters. A reminder before we start, the Council's risk register states, in particular, the Council's medium-term income assumptions are dependent on the successful delivery of these schemes through the margins that it makes on lending to Qualis. The Council is dependent on the Qualis loan margins. However, that essential benefit is contingent on Qualis meeting their repayment obligations, something we'll see in my second speech that hasn't been happening. The Qualis business plan emphasises the importance of Qualis loan revenue to the Council. It's reported they paid interest revenue of 1.78 million last year, and that figure included a net margin of over 2 million. But the Council's budget monitoring report, C029 if you want it, was presented to you last month. You were told then that the Qualis loan margins are significantly below 1%. What's not clear in the business plan is how the margin on loans is over 2 million when the margin on loans is also significantly less than 1%, according to the Council's own reporting. This apparent contradiction raises concerns. It does, however, go to explain the need for the suggested £700,000 out of reserves as a contingency in the 23-24 budget to cover any repayment shortfalls by Qualis. There is a bright spot, though. The Conda Road development is nearing completion and sales receipts are going to be coming through this year. This is highlighted as a major milestone. The £6 million of work in progress costs we'll hear about in the next item will soon start to be offset by sales receipts. But aren't Qualis wanting to remove all the affordable housing from this development? Hasn't their consultant Cartagiona's viability report made it clear that even with 100% open market housing, with zero affordable housing, this development will lose £470,000? I can't see that dealt with.
Sorry, Ms. Jeffcoat, I'm going to have to stop you there because you're straying outside of what this report is actually about, the 4-year business plan, and into an item for tomorrow evening.
Of course, I'm just saying, I can't, as I was saying at the time, I can't see that dealt with anywhere, that loss anywhere in the business plan or indeed in the financial report. As residents, we are left wondering how this Cabinet is going to navigate the Council through this precarious situation. Qualis owes £85 million, secured by £33 million in property assets. Successive business plans appear overly ambitious and unrealistic, not mentioning loss-making sites, for example. Lending more money to Qualis to purchase more assets, Epping Forest assets when they struggle with existing payments and do not have assets to secure their loans seems counterintuitive. Now the business plan tells us investment and development are combined in one company, Qualis Commercial. This will make identifying and separating the operating losses from investment property and any gains from development property more difficult for residents. It's imperative that the council face up to the situation, address these challenges head on, re-evaluate these strategies, keep a very close eye on this business plan and find a sustainable and responsible path out of this situation.
Okay, thank you. And then I shall ask you if you'd like to make your next statement.
Yes, certainly. A moment, let me pull that one up. Before we begin, another reminder. The Council's risk register states the Council has obtained security wherever possible against loans to Qualis, largely mitigating risk. But if Qualis fails, the Council would potentially suffer significant financial loss, as well as reputational damage. This evening I will be referring to both the Budget Monitoring Report and the Board and Shareholder Finance Report, so you may find it useful to have them both open. Let's start with the Budget Monitoring. Point 1.6, it's highlighted that Qualis is not, and I quote, generating sufficient surplus to cover the interest costs. We've heard already the loan margin is significantly less than 1%. The numbers speak even louder at point 1.1, where Qualis incurred a loss of 760,000. Without a tax rebate of 676, that would have been over 1.4 million. What should concern every council and resident is point 3.6 of the Budget Monitoring Report. It's claimed that the value of Qualis assets is broadly equal to the value of council loans. However, this apparent stability is deceptive. I ask you to look to the Qualis Finance Board and Shareholder Report. The balance sheet on page 4 shows a seemingly matched balance of assets and liabilities, but this is largely due to the £40 million work in progress costs, which include spending on sites, infrastructure, construction and operational costs as an asset. The concerning part that even includes the interest that Qualis has paid on Epping Forest loans as an asset of those loans, making it a rather shaky foundation for securing 85 million. The only substantial and tangible assets on the balance sheet are the freehold properties valued at 33 million, securing 85 million in loans. It's not really a comfort to read in the budget report that Qualis net worth has improved fractionally to minus 6.2 million. Qualis currently has 1.7 million in the bank, falling significantly short of their minimum operating level of 6 million. The desperation in stemming the losses is evident, offering the repayment holiday on loan capital mentioned on page 6 of the Board and Shareholder Report and reducing Qualis's interest rate from 4 to 3%. The need for contingency from the reserves this year goes to prove that lending up to 85 million in the last 4 years, mainly unsecured, to generate an income of significantly less than 1% has not been to the Council's benefit. In conclusion, the financials expose the critical need for action to address the desperate losses incurred by Qualis. Providing additional funds to Qualis when they struggle to meet existing obligations seems imprudent. Lowering standards and allowing cuts to essential services and affordable housing commitments should not be part of the solution, but it would disproportionately impact our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution this evening. Members, I take it that's been noted. Can we move on in that case to item 7, overview and scrutiny report? Oh, Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit constrained in what I can say, Leader, because our last meeting was on the 12th of December and it was a private meeting. So what I was going to report on this evening is obviously in public at the moment. So I'm somewhat constrained by what I can say. I hope that the Cabinet found the meeting useful and that perhaps they can take on board some of the things which ONS put forward. And because there will be opportunities to scrutinise the budget in greater detail as things progress. But I'm happy to answer any questions on this if we go into the private session and it crops up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wixley. It's most useful. Moving onwards in that case, item 8 is the police delivery strategy. It is in my name, but Councillor Bedford has agreed to take it from me.
Thank you, Leader. The recommendations are there. The report has been before overview and scrutiny, and we've got the comments there on page 6 and 7. The only thing I'd like to add under the 4 recommendations is we've had a previous comment from a member of the public asking about delegated authority. Just to confirm that the delegated authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of Council and any minor changes to the place delivery strategy as may be required following its consideration by the Council's Cabinet. And this is just to confirm that any minor changes to the place delivery strategy as well may be required following its consideration by Cabinet. So there is a mechanism for amending. If members would just note that, please, because we had a question from a member of the public. Apart from that, it's there before you in the full report, so if any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the Cabinet? No. Any other members? Okay, well, with that one qualification or amendment that Councillor Bedford has just put forward, can we agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. We then move on to item 9, which is the Qualis 4-year business plan. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Wixie for his committee scrutinising the 4-year business plan. It was well received, overview and scrutiny. It was worth noting that at that meeting we had, as we have tonight, both the Managing Director and the Financial Director of Qualis. We also had the Chair of Qualis at that meeting to help us through that. Probably worth setting the scene at the beginning. We had a 1-year business plan last year because of the churn in the marketplace, and we have come now with a 4-year business plan for Qualis. It is worth noting that it is still a very short period of time since we set up the company. The company has not yet got in a position where it can start to sell properties that it has developed, and as such it's working purely with the loans that have been given by Epping Forest District Council and the rent that comes in from the commercial property that they bought fairly early on. Setting those in context, we were aware that as we came into this business plan development phase, the previous business plan had been created in a timescale where it was pre-COVID and pre the global inflation, particularly in the construction trade. We worked with the Qualis team to take that into account to make sure that the objectives and aims of the 4-year business plan were appropriate for the 4 years starting in 2024. We have had a balance in there of reasonable degree of risk, a reasonable degree of optimism, but a fair sprinkling of pessimism as well to make sure that what we're actually bringing forward here is something that makes sense and will be deliverable. Some of the key parts here, though, is that these are called out in paragraph 3.5, the 6 key drivers for the plan. But one of the main things compared to the previous 4-year business plan is driving down the peak debt for Qualis from what it was to a much more sustainable level. I think that's really important both for ourselves and for Qualis going forward to make sure that we achieve something sensible. A reduction in loans to Qualis clearly make a reduction in the interest that we get from Qualis. That is not as big an issue as it might have been before, because the difference in margin has had to reduce as the rates from the Public Works Loan Board have gone up. We have to make sure that Qualis is successful in terms of running itself as a business, so we need to make sure that we also, as a district council, treat those loans sensibly and don't try and get too much for them. And as such, reducing the peak debt is really important. We went through the business plan in great detail at overview and scrutiny. It was ably presented. Members, I'm happy to take questions on this. I have, as I said, both the MD and the Financial Director of Qualis here if we get into too much technical detail. But I would recommend that we approve the 4-year business plan going forward. I'm looking forward with this business plan to being able to come back to Council on a quarterly basis, as we have been doing, and seeing how close to accurate that business plan has become.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. Members of the Cabinet, any questions? I know we've had the opportunity of presentations, and I thought the presentation to overview and scrutiny was most helpful as well. Obviously, this is an important step forward for Qualis as they move into, a period of time when they've actually will hopefully have shortly some homes to deliver, and of course we've seen the benefits that have come through commercial and through the housing repairs service, so there are positive areas there. Any other members with questions? Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to ask particularly, this is set out on page 63, the importance of the future pipeline of development projects, and I just wondered to what extent that had been sort of subject to what we call sort of sensitivity analysis. And in other words, if there's less of a pipeline than anticipated, what's the impact of that on Qualis and the council? And similarly, if it goes the other way and there are more opportunities than are expected. I also wanted to ask, clearly Qualis is fishing in the same pool as lots of other businesses and public sector authorities and so forth for talent in some areas which there's a lot of competition, and I wondered to what extent recruitment and retention was a risk over the business plan period. And a sort of open question at the end, are there any other risks that Mr Small and Mr Jevons want to draw to members' attention?
Councillor Phillip, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse. Clearly, if things deviate from the plan, either fewer things in the pipeline or more things in the pipeline, that will have an effect on the overall revenue that we might get. Clearly, the work that's been done to identify potential elements in the pipeline, I won't go into in public session, because if I identify anything there, it may well skew the price that would need to be paid for those sites. But a lot of work has been done to actually just get to a predicted pipeline that works. As a developer, as any developer will tell you, you need to maintain a pipeline to go forward, so you've always got one job to go on to after you've finished a job. That drives through. If there are fewer items in the pipeline, that will obviously have two effects. One, less borrowing to fund the development, but less profit from delivering a development. More items in the pipeline is possibly an easier one to deal with, because then you can actually just be more choosy about which items in the pipeline you actually deal with and do them at the right time. That is obviously something that will be reasonably challenging over the next 4 years, given the market situation and the maturity of Qualis. In terms of recruitment and retention, I have to say what I've seen from the reports from Qualis, we are recruiting and retaining perfectly in line with what we'd expect. The employees within Qualis that I've had the pleasure of working with have all been of a very good standard. We can see from the newly appointed chairman to the board, we are attracting people of very high calibre, and I was fortunate enough to be part of a interview panel for a new non-executive director with financial speciality for the Qualis board, and I have to say both the candidates there were of exceedingly high standard and were certainly both easy to appoint. I don't know if Mr Evans wants to say anything further about recruitment and retention.
No, I think we believe we've got an attractive recruitment approach, and as Councillor Phillip has said, we have the right resources with the right skills in place to deliver this 4-year plan.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, just for Councillor John Whitehouse's benefit, one of the questions he asked about the pipeline issue and projects going forward, that was a question that was asked at the RNS meeting, so if he wants to have a look at the webcast of that, I'm sure that will give him a bit more information.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Whitehouse, you want to come back?
Yeah, the final question I asked wasn't really answered. Also, I mean, I get that being below or above the pipeline had an impact, and my question was, had that been tested to ensure that if we came in under the pipeline, it was still a sustainable business plan?
Councillor Phillip?
So yes, there's been sensitivity analysis done on the financial plan. Mr. Houth, I know, takes a very serious view of making sure that things are deliverable. One of the instructions that Qualis did get from Mr. Small and myself was to make sure that the 4-year business plan going forward was something that we could firmly stand behind, and we have a reasonable degree of confidence in it. I'm saying that if sitting here 4 years ago, we wouldn't have predicted the COVID pandemic. You can never know all the unknowns. There will always be unknown unknowns, but we're reasonably confident on this. In terms of risk, I think the risks are called out on a regular basis. We also minimise the impact of risk going forward because we do report back on a quarterly basis of progress against the financial plan. We can see as part of the budget setting process the contributions that Qualis is making. It is factored in as clearly one of the risks that the Council has to be aware of, and the risk register goes to the Audit and Governance Committee on a regular basis as far as the Council is concerned, and I know that Qualis have their own audit committee that they can make use of and to make sure that they're managing the risks as well.
Thank you. Right, with no other members, can we note that report accordingly?
Noted.
Chairman, I think we need to agree the approve the plan,
Yes,
the 4-year
of course.
business plan.
So we agree the plan, yes? Can I take that as taken? Thank you. We then move on to item 10, Qualis Quarter 4. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman, and it's useful that this comes after the 4-year business plan. The 4-year business plan shows us where we intend to go. It's like looking out the front window of your car. The Qualis quarterly monitoring report is looking in the rearview mirror to see where we have been. And we know the roads have been somewhat slidey recently. It is, as I said in relation to the business plan, we are at the end of the 4th year of Qualis's trading. It is an organisation that is still significantly levered against their loans. We weren't expecting all things to be rosy by this point, but we know that there are increased costs in our developments. We know that things have not necessarily been as quick as they might be. But as I've said before, in terms of reports on the quarterly approach from Qualis, the detail that we get in those reports from Mr. Howarth is significantly fuller than we used to get, and very confident that it represents a good view of where we are. We are aware that there's a lot of work in progress at the moment, and that will be moving as we go forward. But the good news is to see that in some places the positive story is very good. And we can see called out on page 73 the different parts of Qualis and the changes that are in there. One of the key ones, I guess, if you look at Qualis Property Solutions, we're actually seeing a profit in the Qualis Property Solutions, not maybe as quite much as we'd like, but given that they do work for the council, it's two sides of the one coin. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? No? Okay. Can we take that report as noted?
Noted.
Thank you very much. We then move on to item 11, which is any other business, which is the reports containing the budget. The budget comes in two parts this evening. I will try and do all the budget as much as possible in public session. However, if we stray into the appendices 1 and 2, I will go into private session accordingly because there is information there that we wouldn't wish at this stage to become into the public domain. So, members, we will try our best to keep it in the public session, but just be wary. If you stray, I will immediately put us into private session. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose this is deja vu all over again from last Tuesday. We had a very useful meeting last Tuesday with Cabinet and with Overview and Scrutiny. And I thank again Councillor Wixie for running that meeting and getting us through to the end of it. It was in great detail reviewing what sometimes were very difficult decisions to be made. To be clear, we came into this budget setting knowing that we had a significant challenge. The costs to the Council have gone up significantly from last year. We know that. It shouldn't be a surprise to us. It's the same for all of us in our home life. Energy costs are up, other costs are up, and it's no different for the Council. I will say again, one measure of the challenge that we have is that we had a 5% rise in staff salaries last year. That comes to about 1.5 million. We had a 3%, near enough, rise in council tax. That amounts to between 200,000 and 300,000. That's a gap of over £1 million right there and then. We know that things will be challenging. And I do appreciate the input that we had from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee around where we should be looking to make savings. I said very clearly last week, and I'll say it again in public session, we know that we are not yet at the final position for our budget. The government announced today what our settlement would be, and on initial examination, Mr Hargrove seems to have got it just about spot on. We got what he thought we were going to get. So, again, that's a bit curate's egg, good and bad. We really hope that we actually might get more, but at least we haven't built a budget on the basis of something we haven't got. It's not going to be easy, members. We still have decisions to make around what we can save and what we can afford to get rid of. But as I said last week, one of the things we have to consider here is we're looking at the structural budget. It's not enough. It is not something that we want to solve for 1 year. We have to move the council to a place where our expenditure starts to match our income. If we don't, we will be sitting here every year saying, costs have gone up, our income is down, we've got another problem. We need to fix the problems. That means that sometimes we're going to have to make decisions this year that set us in position for going forward. And those may be difficult decisions. They almost definitely will be difficult decisions because we made a lot of the easy decisions last year. I do want to take this opportunity to thank Mr Small and Mr Hargrove for the work that they've put into the budget. I know how much work and the times I receive emails from Mr Hargrove with a report usually saying, there's been so much work to do, I'm sorry it's at this point. But it just reflects how much actually needs to be done. We work very hard to try and make sure that what comes forward into the public domain is exactly accurate. And to that end, Mr Hargrove has spotted on page 19, and I'll hold my hand up, I hadn't spotted this. In paragraph 2.1, it should read that the updated General Fund Capital Programme is 53.913 million, with an indicative capital requirement of 40.996 million for 24-25. This is one of those classic cases where Mr Hargrove had the right numbers in, was working so hard he managed to convince himself they were the wrong numbers. So to fix the right numbers that he thought was wrong, he put the wrong numbers in that we thought were right. So what I've now read to you are actually the right numbers and not the wrong numbers. I hope that's clear. So, Chairman, we're looking here at a whole number of different parts of the budget that move through together. We will be updating the budget over the coming month. Again, I will crave the indulgence of Councillor Wixie so that we come back to overview and scrutiny with the final budget for their review and comments before we get to Cabinet in February and bring the budget to Council at the end of February. We have to consider tonight the General Fund revenue budget. That is probably our most difficult one to deal with. We also have the HRA budget in there. We have the capital programmes for the General Fund and the HRA, and they're in Appendix C. We have our draft fees and charges. I do want to be clear about the fees and charges, particularly in terms of the HRA. The rent rise is in line with the government's requirements. And you can see that in page 3 towards the middle of the page, where we're proposing a rent increase of 7.7%, which is in line with the government's rent standard. We are putting fees and charges up. Fees and charges have to go up for the reasons I explained before in terms of the costs. We need to share that. I am coming forward at this stage with a recommendation of a 3% council tax rise. It's unfortunate that we have to do this, but it's only fair that we share the pain of the increased costs equally across our residents. We will have to make savings within the council to balance the budget, but it would be entirely wrong to go for a 0% rise and inflict more things on the council and impact our ability to deliver services. Chairman, all my Cabinet colleagues were with me for overview and scrutiny. We have been through in great detail what's happening in here. You can see on page 7 the indicative budget for 24-25, including the changes that have happened since I presented it in October. The explanation of those changes, both in terms of expenditure and income, follow on pages 8 and 9, and 10 and 11 show where the funding is coming from. I will just call out that we have at the bottom of page 11 still making a contribution back into our reserves. Members will remember that we went below the guided 4 million of unassigned reserves at the last budget. I brought forward progress reports suggesting that it will actually be a greater deficit this year than we had predicted. Therefore, we must start to contribute back into our reserves. There are savings proposals called out on page 12, and page 13 says the way forward for the budget. I'm not going to go into detail tonight on the other appendices. I trust my colleagues have read them. I'm sure they have. I'm happy to take questions on it, but just for the complete avoidance of doubt, we have heard over the past weeks, and I'm sure we will hear over the coming weeks, of councils having to declare letter 114s. I want to make it perfectly clear, Epping Forest is not in that position. We are nowhere near that. We have a proposal that allows us to come to February with a balanced budget that actually helps to put money back in our reserves. As we go forward and refine that approach, I sincerely hope that things will become even better than that, and we will be able to not have to make as many of the difficult decisions as we appear that we might have to at the moment. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Phillip. And can I first of all echo and ask to be minuted our thanks to all the officers who have played an active part in this budget-making process. It's the finance team, but it's also across the council where they've had to look at making some very tough decisions this year in particular. As you quite rightly identified, all the low-hanging fruit has gone. We are a very fit and lean council, but that means it's even harder when you have to find the savings to make sure that the council is fit for the future. And of course, one of those things, as you rightfully said, we hope things may be better when we get to February, but we have to be honest with ourselves and say that some of the changes we need to make are structural and will be ongoing. And as with councils up and down the country where they're avoiding 114s, they are entering into quite big transformation programmes ahead of them. And that's the sort of things that we're doing here with shared services and such, which are so important for our future. Working together with other councils is a good way to actually alleviate some of the cost and to make sure that we continue to provide above and beyond. And I know when we looked at this budget very hard, we put great store and importance upon some of the added value we bring as a council, i.e. our own policemen who are contracted by us and targeted by us that help so much with some of the antisocial behaviour issues, and of course our highways rangers who bring the added value that we've seen across the district, including repairing high streets like our own in Epping and in Waltham Abbey where they've done work, and across the district where they play an active role. It would be an awful shame to lose those type of services, and we are doing our best to protect them. Members, any questions? Councillor Kane.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions, more for the benefit of any residents watching than myself. On page 7, we have an item, miscellaneous income, brackets, including Qualis. And we've just heard in the previous item that the net margin on the loans was producing 2 million income last year. Are we expecting a similar level or more this year?
Councillor Phillip.
That's a really good question, Councillor Kane. Given that the loans that we have made to Qualis are fixed-term loans in general, working capital loan is not quite the same. Given that we are trying not to increase our debt burden too much, I would expect the money coming in from Qualis to be very much the same, net of any changes. I don't know, Mr. Small, do we have the plan to give Qualis another loan in the next 12 months that will impact the income from Qualis?
Mr. Small.
Thank you, Leader. So Qualis are still delivering out some current schemes. So certainly, as you're aware, and the development behind us is nearing completion. So there's still some extra funding required to complete those. So the loan value will go up marginally, I think, from the current level. There is potential for interest margins on those loans to increase fractionally above where they currently are, but I think our current assumption, working with our colleagues in Qualis, is reflected in the budget as you see in front of us, really, and that's a combination of anticipated borrowing and our expectation around where borrowing rates will be as well over the course of the next year.
Yeah, of course, Councillor Kane.
So with that in mind, we've got a revenue stream there of 2 million coming in for the forthcoming year, and we're looking at potentially a 3% council tax rise. In revenue terms, what does that 3% represent by comparison to the 2 million that we're looking at from Qualis?
It's very interesting. I was discussing with Mr. Hartgrove beforehand what the 3% rise in council tax actually was going to mean. But in round figures, our council tax take is below 9 million. 3% of that is about 300,000. That, if my maths doesn't let me down, is quite a lot less than 2 million.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Very quick question with regards to the reserves. Obviously, we were advised to get the £4 million, and we're looking at putting in 263 or £263,000 this year. Will that bring us up to a level where £4 million is back in the reserves? And also, is the reserve set of £4 million, is that an ever-increasing amount depending on what the council spends annually, so that £4 million will vary next year in an upward direction?
Councillor Phillip.
So, as called out in the medium-term financial plan, to get back to the 4 million is a series of payments back into our reserves this coming year and the years thereafter. 4 million is the level that's set currently by the Section 151 officer. It's been 4 million for quite a number of years now. Each year when it comes to budget, the Section 151 officer makes a recommendations what he believes the right level of reserves to be targeting at. He hasn't given me any indication that he thinks it's going to go up next year, but we will continue to do what we can when we can to actually get us back to that position, because I'd much rather be sitting in a position where we actually have the right amount of reserves. And I do stress the right amount of reserves, because I know a number of parish councils, for example, have got significant reserves that are much larger than the balance that we would see against our expenditure. There is no point having too much money in your unallocated reserves. You might as well make that money work for your residents. That's what we've tried to do. That's why we've spent those reserves over the last couple of years, to actually make things better for our residents, to actually balance the budget. But it is time to start putting that right.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Brooks.
Well, I was reassured by Councillor Phillips' comment, really, that we're still quite away from declaring ourselves bankrupt. So I take your assurance that, particularly with so many councils in an extremely difficult position, and from what you've said, I don't know the precise amount of the government settlement, that's just been announced, but it was about what we were expecting. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Phillip.
Yeah, I will. It's something that Mr. Small and I have talked about a number of times. So let me just enlighten members ever so slightly. Letter 114 doesn't actually mean that you're bankrupt. It means you can only afford to spend on those absolutely essential things. Now, that can mean your legal commitments. It can also mean that if you have borrowed money, you need to pay that back. So even Thurrock, for example, which did do letter 114, they still had to pay the money back to other councils that lent them. So that there is that. And yes, I can reassure you again, that is not something that has come anywhere near our horizon. We are a well-run council. We have got challenges, as everybody does at the moment, not just councils. We're seeing it in businesses as well. The pressure from inflation, the pressure from increased costs affects everyone. What we want to do in this council is continue delivering services that we know our residents value out of the council, prioritising what we as a council do over other things. And we want to be able to make sure that we can continue to do that in future years. So we have to be prudent now to set the basis in the right place that we can continue, rather than making knee-jerk, one-off type reactions to balance things for 1 year and leave us with similar problems next year. We want to get it right. I believe we can. I believe that with the finance team and my colleagues working on this together, we will be able to produce a balanced budget when we come to overview and scrutiny, cabinet, and finally council next year. It won't be devoid of difficult choices, but that's why we're here. We're here to make those difficult choices. But I can reassure residents that we will continue to do what we need to do. We're not in a position where we won't be, I'll take a punt on my colleague here, we won't be in a position where we're not collecting our bins. We will have our service in-house. It will be picking things. I was going to say deliver. Deliver is probably not the right word for refuse, but pick up the refuse. We will continue to process our planning applications. We will continue to run our elections. We will continue to service the benefits organisation. We will continue to provide places for people to come into the building, into our community hub. We will continue to do all those things because they are important. And we will do it with a balanced budget, and we will move to a position where next year and the year after and the year after, we will be able to continue to do that because we know what we're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Phillip. Any other members? Okay, no other members. We've got the recommendations on page 2, 1 through to 6. Are you happy for those recommendations to be agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, with that being the final item of business on tonight's agenda, I close the meeting. Thank you.